Maybe. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Padjana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Padjana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. And Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrikacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrikacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavina Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Kantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriet Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prayesha bodreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavatyuttama shloke Bhakti bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On the 6th day of February 2023 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Canto 6, Prescribed Duties for Mankind, Chapter 4, the Hamsagurya Prayers, text number 51. Esha Panchajanasyanga Duhita Vai Prajapate Asikni Nama Patnitve Prajesha Pratigriyatam Esha Panchajanasyanga Duhita Vai Prajapate Asikni Nama Patnitve Prajesha Pratigriyatam Esha Panchajanasyanga Duhita Vai Prajapate Asikni Nama Patnitve Prajesha Pratigriyatam Esha Panchajanasyanga Duhita Vai Prajapate Asikni Nama Patnitve Prajesha Pratigriyatam Esha Panchajanasyanga Duhita Vai Prajapate Asikni Nama Patnitve Esha Pratigriyatam Esha Panchajanasyanga Aiva Prajapate Asikni Nama Patnitve Prajesha Pratigriyatam Esha Panchajanasyanga Duhita Vai Prajapate Asikni Nama Patnitve Prajesha Dharma, you want to try? Esha Panchajanasyanga Duhita Vai Prajapate Asikni Nama Patnitve Prajesha Pratigriyatam. Ladies? Esha Panchajanasyanga Duhita Vai Prajapate Asikni Nama Patnitve Prajesha Pratigriyatam. Esha, this, Panchajanasya, of Panchajana, Anga, O my dear son, Duhita, the daughter, Vai, indeed, Prajapate, another Prajapati, Asikni Nama, of the name Asikni, Patnitve, as your wife, Prajesha, O Prajapati, Pradigrihitam, let her be accepted. So Narayan continues to speak to Daksha. O my dear son Daksha, Prajapati Panchajana has a daughter named Asikni, whom I offer to you so that you may accept her as your wife. No purport. Mituna vivaya dharmastvam prajasargamimam punaha mituna vivaya dharminyam buddhisho bhavayishyasi. Now unite in sexual life as man and woman, and in this way, by sexual intercourse, you will be able to beget hundreds of children in the womb of this girl to increase the population. Purport. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita 7:11, Dharma varuddho bhuteshu kamosmi. I am sex that is not contrary to religious principles. Close quote. Sexual intercourse ordained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead is dharma, a religious principle, but it is not intended for sense enjoyment. Indulgence in sense enjoyment through sexual intercourse is not allowed by the Vedic principles. One may follow the natural tendency for sex life only to beget children. Therefore, the Lord told Daksha in this verse, this girl is offered to you only for sex life to beget children, not for any other purpose. She is very fertile, and therefore you will be able to have as many children as you can beget. Close quote. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks in this connection that Daksha was given the facility for unlimited sexual intercourse. In Daksha's previous life, he was also known as Daksha. But in the course of performing sacrifices, he offended Lord Shiva, and thus his head was replaced with that of a goat. Then Daksha gave up his life because of his degraded condition. But because he maintained the same unlimited sexual desires, he underwent austerities by which he satisfied the Supreme Lord, who then gave him unlimited potency for sexual intercourse. It should be noted that although such a facility for sexual intercourse is achieved by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this facility is not offered to advanced devotees who are free from material desires. Annabhilashita shunyam. In this connection, it may be noted that if the American boys and girls engaged in the Krishna consciousness movement want to advance in Krishna consciousness to achieve the supreme benefit of loving service to the Lord, they should refrain from indulging in this facility for sex life. Therefore, we advise that one should at least refrain from illicit sex. Even if there are opportunities for sex life, one should voluntarily accept the limitation of having sex only for progeny, not for any other purpose. Kardama Muni was also given the facility for sex life, but he had only a slight desire for it. Therefore, after begetting children in the womb of Devahuti, Kardama Muni became completely renounced. The purport is that if one wants to return home back to Godhead, one should voluntarily refrain from sex life. Sex should be accepted only as much as needed, not unlimitedly. One should not think that Daksha received the favor of the Lord by receiving the facilities for unlimited sex. Later verses will reveal that Daksha again committed an offense, this time at the lotus feet of Narada. Therefore, although sex life is the topmost enjoyment in the material world, and though one may have an opportunity for sexual enjoyment by the grace of God, this entails a risk of committing offenses. Daksha was open to such offenses, and therefore, strictly speaking, he was not actually favored by the Supreme Lord. One should not seek the favor of the Lord for unlimited potency in sex life. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance to him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, after all the prayers of Daksha, the Hangsa Guhya prayers, very wonderful prayers, and all of these statements from Narayan, Lord Narayan, he kind of gets down to business. This is Daksha's duty, this is his service to populate the universe. Otherwise, how are these poor souls going to get a body in order to go through their karma? And some of them can also become devotees. But Srila Prabhupada is giving us some very important instruction here. And I thought that it would be appropriate to cite Lord Rishabhdev. And these verses, which Srila Prabhupada would often quote, and are quoted, all three of them are quoted in a purport in the Bhagavad Gita. I forget just which verse. Nunam pramakta kurudevi karma yadindriya pritaya apinoti nasadu manye yata atmanoyam asan api kleshada asadeha. I'm going to read this translation. These translations are infused with a good portion of purport. Sometimes I would do that. So they're kind of a little long. When a person considers sense gratification the aim of life, he certainly becomes mad after materialistic living and engages in all kinds of sinful activity. He does not know that due to his past misdeeds, he has already received a body which, although temporary, is the cause of his misery. Actually, the living entity should not have taken on a material body, but he has been awarded the material body for sense gratification. Therefore, I think it not befitting an intelligent man to involve himself again in the activities of sense gratification by which he perpetually gets material bodies one after another. And then he goes on with explaining what happens if someone just lives for sense gratification. Padabhavasthavadaboda jato yavan jigyasata atma tattvam yavat kriyastavadidam manovai karmatmakam yena sharira bandha. These are verses Canto 5, Chapter 5, Text 4, 5, and 6. Translation: as long as one does not inquire about the spiritual values of life, one is defeated and subjected to miseries arising from ignorance. Be it sinful or pious, karma has its result in actions. If a person is engaged in any kind of karma, his mind is called karmatmaka, colored with fruit of activity. As long as the mind is impure, consciousness is unclear, and as long as one is absorbed in fruit of activity, he has to accept the material body. So now, the solution to the whole problem. Evam manakarma vasham payunkte avidyatma nupadiyamane pritir niyavan mahi vasudeve namuchate dehi yogena tavat. When the living entity is covered by the mode of ignorance, he does not understand the individual living being and the supreme living being, and his mind is subjected to fruit of activity. Therefore, until one has love for Lord Vasudev, until one has love for Lord Vasudev, who is none other than myself, he is certainly not delivered from having to accept a material body again and again. So, back to Daksha. The fact is that there's no chance for a material world unless there is this sexual intercourse. This is how reproduction takes place. This is how those who are needing to fulfill their and work out their karma get a body in which they do it. So that's an integral part of the universe. And as Krishna says in his Prabhupada's notes, dharma varudo bhuteshu kamasmi bhadatarshaba, that I am that sex life which is not contrary to religious principles. So if we want to be sincere devotees, then we have to adhere to the principles of dharma in every respect. And therefore, if there's need to get married, and marriage is perfectly fine in ISKCON, there were, and in Prabhupada's day and are today, many exalted devotee couples who have had wonderful children and have done tremendous service for the movement. But there has to be that stricture of not against religious principles. And Srila Prabhupada made it clear at the very beginning that marriage is meant for the basic principle is to beget nice Krishna conscious children, and it's said to be a fort in a sense, where okay, I need this facility for sex life, but I know it's limited in time and certainly in activity. It's meant for having children. So at a certain time, a month when the lady is most fertile, there's a, that's when you have, and then there's this Garbhadan Samskar. When Prabhupada first introduced it and explained it way back in the storefront, which I assume it's the same thing, 50 rounds, chanting 50 rounds of Hare Krishna mantra before indulging in sex life. Now when I heard that, I said, well, after 50 rounds, are you really going to, I mean, it'd be pretty transcendental. But anyway, that's the idea. And the whole point is that your state of consciousness of the man and the woman attracts a certain living entity to come and take shelter in that womb. And if you're both, you know, highly Krishna conscious at 50 rounds, then the idea of a very advanced soul will take birth there. Someone who will, you know, be naturally attracted to Krishna consciousness and so forth. In the third canto, there's an amazing passage where Lord Kapila Dev describes the consciousness of the child in the womb. And it's described as if one is a fortunate soul, then you kind of wake up after 6.5 months. Prabhupada would always say 7 months, but he's talking about lunar months, which are a little bit shorter than solar months. So the gestation takes place for 8 months, 8 lunar months, which comes about to 9 months. But there's a point there where the child wakes up. And you always hear, you know, about, oh, the child is awake, he's kicking against, you know, there's obviously awake. Well, Kapila Dev is revealing what the child is praying in there, you know. And it's more or less like, oh, you know, I really blew it. Here I am in the womb. But I promise, oh Lord, you know, that I will always, you know, I'll be a good devotee. I'll attend Mangalarti from now on, you know. It's all like that. Because he finds it in this predicament. Now, of course, this can't be heard, is not articulating, but the thoughts are there. That's what is according to Bhagavatam. But apparently, he may be a fortunate soul, but he's not necessarily being born in a devotee family, because the next passages describe how when the child takes birth, it's such a traumatic experience, he forgets everything. So he's completely at the mercy of whatever family took place in. It may be a mode of goodness family, but it may not be a devotee family. And so then it's described there that, you know, then he is in full Maya mode, you know. But there is that remembrance. So, but if by, you know, there's a devotee couple and they're performing the Garbhadan Sanskar, then you invite an advanced soul, and from the very birth, the children are being trained up. I distinctly remember Muralidhar, the painter. He was the famous painter who did half the paintings in this room. He was married, and they had a little boy, and this is back in Brooklyn, Radha Govinda, the old temple, Henry Street. And there he was with that, I don't know, maybe a week-old boy, you know, and he was showing them the deities, the little deities, you know. And you know, that's what you're supposed to do. Is supposed to try to turn the child's attention toward Krishna and give them little toys to play that are actually Krishna dolls, you know, like that. What to speak of, you know, reading. And here's another incident you might be interested in. We had a couple here. I don't think anyone who was in this room was here at this time. And we used to do programs at their house. And the lady was pregnant. And she heard about my recording of the Gita. I had done the recording of the whole Bhagavad Gita. So she wanted that recording. I said, sure. I just gave it to her. And she would play that recording. She would listen to it herself, but she would play it. And when the child was born, he didn't come out chanting Bhagavad Gita verses. I mean, it wasn't like that. But I would lead kirtan, just like I lead Sunday kirtan, you know. So when I would lead kirtan, the child would perk up, you know, because he recognized the voice. And she would be moving up and down the temple with the kid, you know. So the engaging in this act of sex, of course, we know that there's a whole many devotees in the brahmacharya ashram, sannyasa ashram, vanaprastha ashram. There's no sex allowed if you want to be a sincere devotee. The whole idea is that this is the main attraction in this world for pleasure. If you can control that and direct that energy toward Krishna, that is a great advantage. That is it's difficult in this age. It's everywhere, you know. And it's, but still, by the power of bhakti as given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the chanting of the holy name, the full absorption, and the acceptance of various austerities. Now, one of the most important austerities in that regard, and it's described in the first verse of the Nectar of Instruction, is controlling those 6 things. And I think the second verse, atyahara priyasacha. So these are the things that destroy devotion. The Nectar of Instruction. Over collecting, overeating, over endeavoring for material things, hearing or speaking, vajalpa, words that don't have anything to do with Krishna. Niyamagraha, which splits up into 2. Niyamagraha means simply not following all of the principles, the regulations. Or, as we described, following them, going through the motions. You're there, but your heart and your mind isn't really there. Now, I said a little comment when that was mentioned that one leads to the other. You can't stay on the platform of just going through the motions for very long. After some time, you're not there in Mangalartik, whereas someone said, "Oh, he slept in." You can't really sustain it. But so that's a signal that you have. If you really want to try to do it, then you have to get serious and be here now. That's a good that's like a very good motto. Became famous with that guy. What was his name? Ram Dass. But that's true for anyone who. The whole thing is your attention. Where you're placing your attention. Vaisheshika Prabhu, where attention flows, energy. Where attention goes, energy flows. Right? It's a nice little motto. It's true. So the whole idea is that when you're chanting japa, be chanting japa. Mahatma is great with this. He has all his advice. But that's concentrating, hearing the holy name. When you're doing puja, you're doing puja. When you're taking prasadam, you should be doing it consciously. Oh, this is Krishna's. Krishna tasted this, And atyahara priya. Okay, I'm going to take moderate amount. It's a challenge. Because if you're controlling all the other sense gratifications, and Prabhupada knew, Westerners, they're going to need an outlet. All right, eat as much as you want, waddle like a duck. Waddle like a duck, eat up to here. All right, let's get into it, from Sunday feast. But then after a while you say, okay, atyahara priyasacha. You can recognize that it's difficult to control the mind. And one leads to the other. Vacho vegam manasakra jiva vegam monoropasta vegam. If you can't control the demands of the tongue, then you eat too much, puts pressure on the downside, and you get more agitated. So it's all connected. Now, as you go on in Krishna consciousness, you're able to sustain it. Then what is taking place is you're becoming more attracted to Krishna. That Krishna is giving you that blessing. You're sincerely chanting. And what does it say right there at the beginning in the 2nd chapter of the 1st canto? Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayadahoitikam. If you're sincerely serving Vasudev, Krishna, Bhagavati, the Supreme Personality, Bhakti Yoga, the process of Bhakti Yoga, then quickly you will attain Vairagya, knowledge and detachment. They go together, knowledge and detachment. So that detachment, that's a big help. It means that you're not always, that your mind is not always giving you some trouble, and the attachment is waning. And you're able to sublimate that energy, which is even the Western psychology, sublimate that energy into Krishna consciousness, into enthusiasm for Krishna consciousness. And eventually that vairagya becomes so strong that illicit sex, which may have been something that you couldn't get out of your mind at a certain point, is something that if it enters your mind, it's not attractive. The famous Yamunacharya verse. What is Yadavadi Mamacheta Krishna Padhara Vinde Navadanava Samajan Yunditam Rantamasi Tadavadi Badanadi Sangame Smaryamane Babati Mukhabikado Sushtanishtivanancha. So this is the Yamunacharya who had a kingdom. The whole story I'm not going to go into again. He won this kingdom by debating the king's minister. And when he had a kingdom, he had all facility, and he had. So, but then he was saved from that. Then he became Yamunacharya. And so, but inevitably the mind will do its thing. Something may kick off a memory, and suddenly you remember. So he said, whenever that remembrance comes, turn my face in disgust and I spite at it. Prabhupada would say, spit at the thought. You can imagine, you know. Now instead of spitting at the thought, people their mouth is watering. You know, just the opposite. Everywhere you go, there's they sell everything on the basis of that, the sex desire. It's a very dangerous culture. But if we are protected by sincere bhakti, basically as much as possible hearing and chanting. I like to give this example. It's not exactly about sex life, but it's about eating. We used to go downtown to South Street for Harinam in Philadelphia. I lived there for three years and working on Bhakti Guided. And it's one of these places where there's no traffic. It's all pedestrian, and a lot of businesses cycling. It's a tourist place. And they had this one place that would cook cookies. They would make cookies. They would specialize in, chocolate chip cookies. So naturally, they would pump out the fresh cookie, cooking odor into the square. And people, maybe unconsciously, would think, I think I could really use a cookie now, and then people would go. So we're doing a kirtan. And of course, we're smelling the odor, which is attractive, obviously. But immediately, the idea comes, oh, this is boga. This is offered, So any idea of eating the cookie is completely knocked out, right? So, and you're getting into the kirtan, and you're feeling bliss from the kirtan, and that they couldn't penetrate. Where it becomes a desire, you're going to get your wallet and go get some cookies. So the same thing could be there even for sex life. We did a lot of New Year's Eve Harinams. This is when we started again after the pandemic. Actually, we did one a year ago too. And all kinds of people come down there. They only come that time, that one day, and there's just crowds and crowds of tourists and people that come that day. So naturally, there's ladies who are scantily dressed, like that. So we're coming up to the corner, and there's like a whole passel of ladies there who are scantily dressed. And we were just chanting, Hari Bol, Hare Krishna, like that. And it wasn't a problem. It was a real armor against that. At least at that moment, you could feel like Haridas Thakur, and then prostitute in the middle of the night. We didn't convert any of them, I don't think. Who knows? Maybe they went and joined the ashram somewhere. But that's the idea, is that we have a certain amount of, because we're part and parcel of Krishna, so we have this enjoying tendency, which in Maya, we turn away from Krishna, but that enjoying tendency is there. That's why at the end of chapter 3, in the Bhagavad Gita, a wonderful section where Arjuna asks, what is it that impels us to do things that are against our own interest? And what's the answer? Who knows it? Kama esha. Kama esha, krodha esha, rajoguna samundala, mahashano, mahapapma, vindenami abaidinam. So he's telling Arjun, there's your real enemy, not all those soldiers there, This is your real enemy. Is lust only. Now this word lust, the kama, has a broader meaning than just lust. Lust in the English mostly is just reserved almost exclusively for sex attraction. Kama certainly includes that, and when Krishna says it's kamosmi badatarshaba, that's what he's referring to. But it has a broader meaning. If you look up kama in the Sanskrit dictionary, you'll see, yes, sex desire, but any strong desire for sense gratification, that's kama, you see. So that's what he's speaking about here. That desire is inevitably, it's frustrated and produces anger. Now that anger can also be turned inward, and eventually you get depressed. Everywhere I go, I can't enjoy anything anymore. I might as well commit suicide, right? But oftentimes it's expressed outwardly, which is very dangerous, because you can do things that you're really sorry for. How did I do that? I killed my brother. He took my girlfriend. I can't. Prabhupada tells a story that there was a brother who killed his brother in India. He tells that, illustrating this point. So, and we know from the second chapter how it's a big escalator downward. It keeps getting faster and faster. Dhyayado vishyan pungsat sangashteshu bhajayate sangat sanjayate kama. Kama krodho bhajayate. Krodhat bhavati sammoha. When you're in complete anger and fury, you'll do things that you say, how did I do that? Sammoha, I'm completely bewildered. That's why this situation is so dangerous now. We have the war going on in Ukraine, basically between the United States and Russia. They both got these nuclear weapons, and it's easily possible to lose it, one of the leaders, and become so angry because he's losing the war that he shoots the bombs and the whole world is finished. Well, the world won't blow up, it'll starve to death because of the nuclear winter. All of this stuff they've already figured out. Even if a war takes place between Pakistan and India and they blow off all their nuclear weapons, or even a portion of them, it'll create huge havoc around the world. This is the world we live in. It's all due to Kama and Krodha. We deserve this land. No, we deserve this land. This is the source of all the wars. And in the end, so much suffering, so much horror. This is Kali Yuga. Kali means quarrel, war, dissent. So, our answer is, first of all, the personal answer is to be, isn't it? Is that we may die at any moment? What's that verse? Remember that our final breath may come at any time, no matter if we're old and sick or in our youthful prime. So young and old alike should chant the name incessantly, the holy name of Shri Hari is surely all that be. What is that? Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi Dukkha Dosha Darshanam. That's part of knowledge, to always be aware of the dangers of birth, old age, disease, and death. And sometimes you may not get to old age. Some disease or some accident, some war, whatever. So this is a serious business. It means we have to be serious about getting to the point of always remembering Krishna, remembering Him more and more and more by service. As soon as you yield to sense gratification, immediately forget Krishna. In order to engage in it, you have to forget Krishna. So that's how we got here. So the serious thing now, of course, this is a case in which the Lord is ordering him to engage in sex life for a very important purpose. But, it's so dangerous, Daksha becomes angry. He becomes angry at Narada Muni. Just as the Prachetas became angry because they couldn't do their service, right? That's the immediate cause. But the anger itself is so destructive. He gets angry at Narada Muni. Remember why? Because he made some bhaktas, 10,000 of them. Convinced him that no. He gave him a riddle and they solved it, and they said, yeah, what's the point? And they went off, took sannyas. And now Daksha had sent them off. That'll come up in the next chapter. So, perform austerities. That's the right thing, just like Prachetas. Perform austerities, become purified, and then you can have, sex life and beget children. But they got to the austerities part, but then they came to Narada Muni and he thought, oh, these are good candidates for sannyas. Forget about, Prajapatis. And then so Daksha is angry at Narada Muni, cursed him, you can't stay anywhere for more than 3 days or something, right? Like that, right? So he's always traveling and preaching. So he said, so then the Daksha sends another set, the Shavalashvas, these are brothers. And Narada again comes and he says, just follow the path of your brothers, they're doing very well. Oh, okay. And boom. And so Daksha said, oh, there's Narada Muni. So his solution was, forget sons, I've got daughters. Narada won't even bother with them. And that's why we all descend from the daughters of Daksha. It's described. And that's not just human beings, all kinds of mammals and everything. So, but one lesson here is that it's like playing with fire. Daksha became very empowered to have all the sex life, but he couldn't control his emotions, once he get into that. And so he became angry at Narada Muni when he should have glorified him and bowed down. So there's a lot of lessons here. Prabhupada is giving this purport, perfect instruction. Yes, dharma vudara bhuteshu, there's a place for it. I remember one lecture I heard him speak, and he said, after all all of the great acharyas, Ramanuja, and Bhakti Siddhanta, and all of it. We all were children at once. We had mothers and fathers, so sex life could be very important and good. It's not an evil, but it's like it's fire. It has to be dealt with very carefully so it doesn't degrade you. The present culture has no idea about that, and the danger is that the whole society becomes degraded and very dangerous, because you have that verse Prabhupada quoted all the time. Namam dushkrita no mudha papadyante nararama mahayapata jnana asura bhavanashata. These are the kind of people who don't surrender to me, Krishna. So dushkritana, namam dushkrita no mudha papadyante. So the mood is the second count. But the first is the dushkritina. And Prabhupada's explaining, I just heard a lecture, it means that they have a lot of good qualities. They can be very intelligent, very creative, but they use it for bad purposes. The intelligence is used for creating new weapons. So many bright people go to MIT and so forth, and they get lured in by the Defense Department, high security of employment and good salary, and all of that intelligence is used for refining weapons and creating more killing machines. Horrible. So this is the world we live in. It's dangerous. The only countervailing force that can actually succeed in saving the world is Krishna consciousness movement. Prabhupada said they will one day thank this movement for saving the world in a dangerous time. So we'll see what happens. I mean, there's so many wonderful devotees in the Ukraine. Some of them, of course, are refugees now. But we'll see what Krishna has in mind. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the world almost blew up, when I finally joined about 10 years later, I was thinking how, Prabhupada came in '65, just a year or so after, 2 years after that. And although and the whole hippie era created a kind of a turmoil, and some people were really searching. They didn't know how or why, what they were searching for God, this and that. But among those, there were some who came in touch with Prabhupada and became serious. Many just became serious for some time, but some time in order to make others and print the books and the magazines and start the movement. So Krishna is, after all, ultimately in charge. And we can, be serious devotees and try to be as Krishna conscious as possible, because there's great danger. But at the same time, have great hope that somehow Krishna will produce a miracle, and there will again be peace in the world, enough for Krishna consciousness to flourish, and the TOV can open and become a great beacon of spiritual life. So that's my little take on this verse. I think it's very clear what Prabhupada is saying here, that there is scope for sexual intercourse if that's necessary, if you feel that's necessary for your Krishna consciousness, but it has to be done under great restriction in a Krishna conscious way, and then it's auspicious. Any discussion on this point? Okay, Raj Gopal has a question, and he has the mic too.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, in the last para of the purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying that it's better to refrain from that, although one may have an opportunity for sexual...
Is this the paragraph that begins, one should not think that, Daksha?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think in the 4th or 5th line it says, although one may have an opportunity for sexual enjoyment by the grace of God, this entails a risk of committing offenses. How does sex life cause the risk of offense?
Well, because if it's not done strictly according to the Shastra and Guru, then that itself is an offense. You're offending the Guru by disobeying his orders, right? So that's an offense. And then what happens is that you're let's say playing with fire, you're becoming more passionate. And it's in that mood, it's more likely that you will offend other devotees, because you're in the enjoying mood, and Krishna consciousness movement is not made for that, and so you become more frustrated. It's the modes of nature. In the mode of goodness, is less likely to commit offenses. You're more aware. You're more in control. But sex life is, is like it's a powerful weapon, a powerful energy, which can, if it's not carefully handled, can affect your heart, so that you become more prone to other enjoyments. And you're now amongst the devotees, but they're trying to do the opposite, and so the chance of offense, it grows. It's just like, it's the ayato vashyampunksa. You're yielding to the allurements of sense gratification, and so anger becomes more likely. And that anger, unfortunately, when directed toward devotees, can produce a great offense.
Okay.
Okay, well, hold on a second.
I'm sorry.
Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji. I have one more question.
Okay, go ahead. We have a little time.
So when you were mentioning the pastime of Daksha committing an offense to Narad Muni because his sons are taking sannyas instead of generating progeny, so we see that many times in our own families, we do not necessarily come from Krishna conscious families. We owe a debt to our parents, but at the same time, they don't agree with the principles that we follow, and so they feel like we have violated their trust. So how does one reciprocate with their parents, knowing that they've given us this human life which helped us to practice Krishna consciousness, but we cannot agree or consult them for these spiritual matters?
Yeah, it's a duty that we have that sometimes is very difficult to fulfill because they're in so much opposition. Just by being Krishna conscious, just by advancing Krishna consciousness, you're tremendously helping them. You don't necessarily have to interact, extensively with them. But the more you advance in Krishna consciousness, the more this is several times in the Shastras described like that. Just like Prahlad, he was worried about his father, who was such an offender and just a demon. And Nrsingadev said, don't worry. So many generations back and so many generations forward, and they're blessed, they're saved, because you're such a great devotee. So, of course, Hiranyakashipu was Jaya Vijay, so he went back to Godhead. And we know his descendants, Bali Maharaj was Mahajan, and even Banasura was also a descendant. He wasn't killed by Krishna. He was, he was kind of pruned. He had 1,000 arms. He ended up with 4 arms, but still, he was blessed. His daughter was married to Krishna's grandson or son, and so that's the idea. Is that sometimes it's impossible. If the parents are, they try to deprogram you. That's of course an extreme example, but maybe they don't tie it, but they wish they could. In other words, it's that kind of opposition and misunderstanding. Then it's best to minimize the contact. But still, if you're a good devotee, then Krishna will see, and they will be benefited in some way. So it's not, you have to simply modulate or watch this, how much they're open to. Taking prasadam, for instance, is a big thing. If they don't like what you're doing, but they love the prasadam, so that's great. So it's sometimes very difficult. I had a good. My mother was really into it. She was a subscriber to Back to Godhead, like that. My father, all they could ask me whenever I saw him, he was pretty sick at the end. When are you coming out of that thing? I was 20 years already in the 20 again. Anyway, at least he was thinking about Krishna. Okay, Cletus,
yes,
you're on.
Thank you. You mentioned...
Cletus, I'm sorry.
Yes, you mentioned that a divine awakening of childbirth.
Yeah, in the womb.
Yeah, and we can see that correlates with Prahlada Maharaj, right?
Prahlad Maharaj was fully awake in the womb, and he was hearing Narada Muni. He's a special case.
Yeah, and so my question is, what's the difference between, or is there a difference between is there a scheduled awakening, one who from birth is born into a Brahman family, versus one who comes into the ashram and later on in his adult life awakens?
Well, it's not a question of schedule, but someone, like Prabhupada would refer to his own fortunate birth. To be born into a devotee family is the most fortunate birth. But many of us weren't born in devotees' family. Prabhu, Sureshwar, look to your right. Okay. But that doesn't mean you can't become a devotee later. The thing is, by the mercy of the spiritual master Lord Chaitanya, devotees are preaching, and if you're open to it, and you can take a book and read and become a devotee, even though you were born in a demoniac family. So, but Kapila Deva is describing a general principle that the child wakes up. There's these consciousness there, but there's not much that you see with it. Although the kicking, there's obviously a change. But what's going on in the brain or in the mind of the jiva is invisible. You can't see that. So he's revealing that there is an awakening there. And that it doesn't happen in every case. This is the thing. It's a fortunate soul who experiences this. But everyone wakes up at that time. At 7 months. I think the doctors will tell you that there's a change, in the brain. So it's all a question of two things. One is your past qualifications from what you may have some credits in devotion, and therefore you get a certain birth, which is you continue it. Krishna says that in the 2nd chapter of Gita. And it also has to do with the whole transcendental arrangement of which womb you get born in. According to the consciousness of the parents at the time of conception, it's very interesting that they call it conception. The conception, right? What they're thinking of. They attract a certain soul to take shelter in that womb. So nothing is happening by accident. But even if one is, and most of us were born in non-devotee families, you can still become a devotee because we have free will by the mercy of the Lord and His representatives. That's the whole idea, and that's why this movement is going on. Okay, and we have Prakash.
Jai Prabhu. So I was thinking about Dhruva Maharaj, and he also approached the Lord with material desires.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, like when he met the Lord, he was completely purified of that desire. And I mean, he got like a very big material benediction of having a kingdom. But we see in the Prajapati Daksha's case why it was not so. Like he also approached the Lord with the material desires, but he gets it fulfilled, but we don't see like he's really flavored by the Lord or...
it's a good question because it's almost like, Daksha has this facility, he's into that and he has the ability to do it, but it gets him into trouble. I mean, he probably refers to his interaction with Lord Shiva. He became very proud. He insulted Shiva. His daughter commits suicide, and his son-in-law becomes really angry, sends Virabhadra and his crew, and they behead him. He gets the goat head. Real big mistake. So he's trying to avoid that now. Now he's got, but he still has that facility and he still has that desire. So this is needed. This facility is needed in order to populate the universe. But as Prabhupada says, it's not really a great blessing of the Lord, and because he gets entangled again in anger, and he gets so it's sometimes it's like that. You'll have a certain facility to serve, and it's engaged, but the actual activity that you're doing is fraught with danger because you have to deal with the modes of nature so much, like that. And we see so many devotees of Prabhupada. They did so much important service, but they became a little lax in their sadhana or whatever. One of the dangers is to take on so much responsibility that your sadhana is messed up. And you're not really on the pure level where you can, go days without sleep, and it doesn't work that way. And so then you become prey to the modes of nature, and you commit offenses, like that. Movement is, but the work you did, what you built, that goes on, and the movement goes on and becomes more mature. It's just an emergency situation. So in our own lives, we should be monitoring our spiritual health all the time. Have I taken on so much service? Have I committed to something that is now going to, mean that I can't share my rounds properly, or whatever, And so then we go to authority and say, this is too much, let me, do this. So it all has to be adjusted. So Daksha, he has this important skill. The Lord is engaging him, but it was dangerous because it can easily lead to anger, which it did, and an offense. So Daksha, hopefully in his next life, he was just nice sattvic, down the road, All right, I think we better adjourn unless. No. Oh, you have a question? Okay. I'm sorry. Nice.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Quick question. With Daksha populating the universe, is this at the beginning of a day of Brahma or like a lifetime of Brahma?
Not a lifetime. I think it's a day. Whenever he sleeps, there's a partial destruction. Okay. So he has to do a lot of the same work when he wakes up, which is all the living entities, they merge back into Garbhodaksha Vishnu, I think, and then they have to come out and get bodies. So that's a big headache for him.
Okay, so that happens every day.
Yes,
every day of Brahma. Okay, thank you.
The day of Brahma.
Just an add-on, Prabhu. So the sense gratification thing. So are there any levels? Means let's say having some extra peanut cookie, if compared to taking drugs. So are they on the same level?
Oh, I'm not getting the drift of the question. Did you understand?
No.
She didn't understand either.
No, I think
okay, so you explain.
You were able to comprehend what is it that I'm saying?
Yeah, you were saying, is there different levels of sense gratification, like having an extra cookie compared to taking hard drugs?
I see. See, I heard cooking. Not cookie.
No, cookie. It was definitely cookie,
that
right?
That changes everything.
Okay, yeah.
My ears, your accent. Yeah. So, yes, there are definitely levels. There are definitely. I must confess, I've had extra cookies sometimes. Who can resist cannibalized cookies? In fact, when I go to Trader Joe's, I go like this, and I've had 3 times already. They say, "Oh, thank you so much for the cookies." We take them back to the break room in the back there, and they immediately get taken. Nobody taken it. So they're mad after those cookies, which is good because they're prasadam. But no, there's definitely gradations. Yes, totally. Especially if the cookies are offered. Taking an extra cookie it may be a little bit across the line, but then you can say, okay, I'll just jump higher in the next kirtan, and I'll make it up. So you don't have to worry so much about that. But the danger is if you the extra cookies, and then before long you're saying, well, does it really need to be offered? Because this cookie looks good. So we have to be careful even with that. Once a week you can have 1 extra cookie, okay? All right.
In case if we are, let's say, getting some donations from someone who is doing illicit activity, means it can be like a gangster or dacoit or whatever. Yeah. So is it okay? Means can we take that money and use like in our activities, devotional activities, or
yes,
it
totally
can be used?
Yes, it becomes purified. I mean, they got this box in the prasadam little room. Thank you for your donations. So we think there's no note there, but if you're not following the 4 other principles, forget about it. We don't accept it. No, people come from all over, and it's a devotional act that goes into their account and will help them when they become devotees. So you can do it. Okay. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.